Welcome to True Echo, where stories don't just inspire, they awaken something deep inside. Today's journey is about hidden genius, broken silence, and a single performance that shook an elite institution to its core. This is more than a story about music. It's about what happens when a billionaire in hiding puts down his fortune and picks up a mop, only to leave a room full of prodigies sobbing from a piano no one believed he had the right to touch. Now, let's begin. At the Albrecht Conservatory, silence wasn't empty, it was expectant. The kind of hush that settled in cathedrals before sermons or in grand ballrooms before applause. But on most mornings, before the doors opened to entitled prodigies and legacy donors, that silence belonged to one man in coveralls, Eli. To the students, he was just the janitor. A tall, quiet figure in his 50s, silver at the temples, eyes tired but not defeated. He wore a faded uniform that never quite fit right and moved with the deliberate grace of someone who used to move for different reasons. Most assumed he was someone who'd made a few wrong turns in life and was now doing the work no one else wanted. Mopping floors, scrubbing marble benches, hauling trash out to bins behind the conservatory's grand facade. No one asked about the classic Bentley he parked 2 blocks away. And no one ever suspected that Elijah Rowe, the world-renowned pianist who vanished after a tragic European tour, now stood quietly polishing doorknobs and cleaning up coffee spills before sunrise. The only sign of the man he once was came once a week, when Eli passed the old basement in the east wing. Down a narrow staircase where the temperature dropped and the ceiling leaked, hidden behind easels and broken stools, sat an old upright piano, water-damaged and silent. Most faculty had forgotten it existed. It wasn't fit for performance halls or even practice rooms. But Eli remembered it. Not the exact model, but the feeling. A piano like that had once been in his grandmother's home in Birmingham, where he first learned to play by ear, too poor for lessons but too hungry for sound to let that stop him. One morning, with no one watching, Eli dusted off the keys. A sticky G, a cracked high E. Still, when he sat, the bench creaked like it recognized him. He didn't play anything anyone would know. He didn't play to impress. Just a quiet melody, something aching and unfinished, like a letter that had waited decades to be written. The notes drifted up through the vents and cracks like incense. Most were too distracted to notice. But one person did. 17-year-old Lena Thomas had arrived early, seeking silence before her dreaded composition class with Professor Langston. Lena, a scholarship student from Chicago's South Side, had learned early how to make herself small. In this place of towering egos and gleaming Steinways, she was treated like a guest in someone else's mansion, tolerated, but rarely embraced. She was used to playing pieces that others deemed appropriate. Pieces that were, technically safe, emotionally contained, and program-approved. But what she heard floating from the floor below wasn't safe at all. It was bleeding. And beautiful. She followed it like a moth follows a distant light. Down the stairwell. Past the flickering utility bulb. Through the forgotten door. But by the time she stepped inside, the music had stopped. The room was empty. Only the old piano remained, quietly humming with the aftertaste of a secret. She squinted, convinced she'd seen movement behind the stack of old theater curtains, but when she peeked, there was nothing. Only silence. Only dust. She told no one. Later that morning, back in the atrium, Lena walked past Eli as he scrubbed a stubborn scuff off the glass wall. Their eyes met for just a second. He said nothing. But his gaze lingered on the sheet music poking out of her folder. "You didn't play it wrong," he said quietly, still scrubbing. She blinked. "What?" "That piece you practiced. You didn't play it wrong." She stopped walking. He didn't look up. "You just didn't let it breathe. You're playing it like you owe it something. Next time, open the third phrase with the left pedal half down. Give it weight. Let it ache." She stared at him, stunned. "You play." He gave a faint, crooked smile. Used to. Before she could ask anything else, a fellow student walked by, casting her a questioning glance. Lena quickly moved on. But that night, she returned. Back to the basement. And this time, he was there. Eli didn't speak at first. He simply nodded at the old piano. She walked over, slowly, unsure. He scooted aside. "Try your piece," he said softly. Her hands trembled slightly as she started. The cold keys bit at her fingertips. She hit a wrong note and recoiled. But he didn't scold. Instead, he reached over, gently pressed one key, and murmured, "Here. Let it linger." She tried again. He guided her with stories, not instructions. "This part, think of it like standing on a train platform in the rain, waiting for someone who said they'd come back. Here, this note should sound like regret. Like the apology you never gave." By the end, she was breathless. "And not from fear. You played like you were afraid of being wrong," he said. "But the music's already been written. It just needs you to show up honestly." She stared at him. "Why are you helping me?" Eli shrugged. "Maybe I see something in you that other people forgot to look for." He stood, rolled his sleeves back down, and disappeared behind the curtains like smoke. Upstairs, the world spun forward as usual. Rehearsals. Lectures. Recitals. But downstairs, in the quiet heart of a broken room, something had changed. A janitor had passed along something more powerful than technique. Truth. And Lena, for the first time in weeks, could hear it. Not from the stage. But from her own hands. The next day began with frost curling on the inside of Lena's dorm window. She barely noticed. Her mind was still echoing with the stories Eli told through sound, how every note could mean something if she stopped playing like she needed permission. She hadn't told anyone about the basement or about him. It wasn't fear that kept her quiet, it was something closer to reverence. Like saying it aloud might break the spell. At breakfast, the noise of competition returned. Talk of auditions, guest judges, the winter gala. Everyone wanted the spotlight. Everyone wanted to be next. Lena listened, detached, thinking instead of that cracked upright piano and the way Eli never told her what to do, he only told her how it felt. In composition workshop, Professor Langston circled like a hawk. His eyes narrowed at Lena the moment she walked in. He didn't like surprises. Didn't like scholarship students showing up with original pieces when they were supposed to be learning structure. He believed talent needed to be shaped like stone, chiseled down to fit into halls lined with bronze plaques and family legacies. "You've brought new material again?" he asked, flatly. Lena nodded. "It's a work in progress. Everything is. But that doesn't mean you show it in public," Langston said. "We don't need emotional scribbling. We need clarity, discipline." But Lena didn't sit down. "I'm going to play it anyway," she said. Gasps fluttered through the room. Langston froze. "What did you say?" She sat at the baby grand. Opened her folder. Her hands trembled, but not with fear. With certainty. She began to play. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't polished. But it was alive. She played the melody she and Eli had shaped together. Inheritance, that's what she called it now. The story of who she'd been told to be, who she truly was, and the bridge she built between them. Her fingers faltered on the second page, but she caught herself. Adjusted. Breathed. The music shifted, delicate, aching, honest. When she finished, the room was silent. Langston's face was unreadable. "Where," he said slowly, "did you learn that voicing?" Lena looked up. "I heard it." "From whom?" A pause. "From someone who listens better than you teach." That did it. Langston slammed her folder shut. "The janitor's been filling your head with this nonsense, hasn't he?" Lena didn't flinch. He hasn't filled it. He's helped me hear what was already there. Langston's jaw tightened. He is not faculty. He's not even qualified. You're risking your standing here, Miss Thomas. But she was already packing up. She walked out. And this time, 3 other students followed. That night, the basement piano came to life again. Eli was there, waiting, unsure if Lena would return. She did. And behind her came 4 others, a cellist named June, Claire the violinist, and 2 twin composers from the jazz program. They didn't speak at first. Just stood quietly in the doorway, notebooks clutched like shields. Are we in the right place? Claire asked, glancing nervously at the warped ceiling and dusty chairs. You are, Lena said, setting her music down. Eli didn't greet them like a teacher. He greeted them like fellow travelers. If you're here to be right, he said, go back upstairs. But if you're here to be heard, stay. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was sacred. Claire stepped forward first, surprising even herself. She took out her violin. No sheet music. Just her memory. She played something she said she'd never shown anyone, not even her competition coach. It was jagged, atonal in parts. It stuttered, then soared. She finished, blinking as though waking from a dream. Was that good? She asked, her voice small. It was honest, Eli replied. Which is better? Each student took a turn. Not a recital. A release. June cried after playing his cello piece, and no one laughed. The twins shared a 2-minute jazz riff that sounded like chaos, then somehow resolved into harmony. No one corrected them. And Lena? She didn't play that night. She just watched. Watched how Eli listened with his whole body. How he gave back not instructions but insight. How every wrong note was welcomed like a necessary part of the journey. It wasn't a masterclass. It was a revolution in the basement. But upstairs, the storm was brewing. Langston had already filed a complaint. He'd sent emails to the dean, to the faculty board, to anyone who would listen. He's manipulating them, Langston barked over a half-empty cup of coffee in the lounge. They're ditching class to meet a man with no credentials. Dr. Fenwick, the aging violin instructor, peered over his glasses. Or maybe they're finally learning something we stopped teaching a long time ago. Langston sneered. He's a janitor. Or he's something we never bothered to understand, Fenwick said. And maybe that's the real problem. Back in the basement, Lena lingered after the others left. She helped Eli wipe down the keys. Did you really compose? She asked, softly. Once. Were you famous? He looked away. Once. Why'd you stop? He hesitated, then whispered, because I forgot how to listen. Lena looked at him, really looked. But you're finding it again. He nodded. Thanks to you. And for a moment, neither spoke. Not out of awkwardness. But because the silence between them felt like music too. The frost was thicker the next morning, clinging to windows and cobblestones like the world was trying to muffle itself. Inside the Albrecht Conservatory, that cold seeped into every room, not just physically, but politically. Rumors flew faster than scales in a practice room. Some students whispered that the janitor had been caught playing after hours. Others said he used to be someone. And a few, those who descended into the basement, remained silent, their eyes more alert, their steps more purposeful, as if they'd begun to hear things others had forgotten how to notice. Eli, as always, said nothing. That day, while wiping down the ornate railings of the west stairwell, he was interrupted by the sharp voice of maintenance supervisor Donnelly. I catch you at that piano again, Donnelly barked, and I'll have you reassigned to outdoor duties. This is a conservatory, not a lounge act. Eli turned, unshaken. Just making sure the keys still work. You're not paid to test the damn keys. You're paid to mop. Got it? Eli nodded. No argument. No explanation. But the words echoed into the wrong ears. By lunchtime, half the student body knew about it. Lena kept her head low but her spine straight. She wasn't afraid. Not anymore. That afternoon in Professor Langston's class, Lena made her quietest move yet, and it set the whole room on fire. She submitted Inheritance to the winter recital committee. A solo. Her arrangement. No accompaniment. No compromise. Langston nearly choked. You're not even listed on the final roster, he growled. Students of your level don't typically close the winter recital. Lena's eyes stayed fixed on her sheet. Then maybe it's time you adjusted the roster. He stared at her, jaw tight, knuckles white on the piano's edge. But he couldn't stop her. She had the board's approval. She had the students behind her. And worst of all, she had the audience's curiosity. Whispers spread through every practice room and corridor. The scholarship girl was playing something unheard of, unsanctioned. And not just that, word had gotten out she was collaborating with the janitor. The night before the recital, Lena's phone rang. Her mother. Baby, you okay? You've been quiet. I'm fine, Lena replied. Just nervous. Her mom's voice softened. Nervous means you care. I'm playing a piece they didn't approve. There was silence on the other end. Then play it like your life depends on it. When Lena stepped onto the recital stage the next evening, time slowed. The auditorium was packed. Crystal chandeliers dripped light over velvet seats. Donors, parents, and professors filled the rows, their expressions ranging from polite interest to veiled disdain. At the front, Langston sat like a stone statue, arms crossed. And backstage, behind the curtain, Eli waited, unseen. Lena sat at the Steinway. She didn't begin right away. She closed her eyes. Then opened them. Then breathed. And the first note was a thread of silk unraveling in the dark. The melody was sparse at first, hesitant, then blooming. No one knew the piece. But within seconds, no one cared. Phones lowered. Fidgeting ceased. Eyes locked. Somewhere in the third row, a woman with too much perfume covered her mouth with her hand, tears pooling. Langston's knuckles were white again, but this time not from anger. From fear. Because something was happening he couldn't stop. The music wasn't flawless. But it was real. And when Lena released the final note, a single suspended breath that seemed to hover in the rafters like a prayer, the entire room held still. Then. Applause. Not polite. Not programmed. A wave. Thunderous. Emotional. Cathartic. People stood. Some wept. Langston did not move. But Eli, backstage, let out a quiet exhale. Not a smile. Not a tear. Just a breath. As if something inside him had unclenched after years of holding on. When Lena walked off stage, a crowd of students swarmed her with questions. How'd you write it? Who helped? Where did it come from? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Because that night, she hadn't played for them. She'd played for herself. The next morning, the conservatory board summoned Eli to the top floor, the conference room with glass walls and expensive pens. Langston was already there. Livid. He violated protocol, Langston snapped. He gave unauthorized lessons. He trespassed on school property after hours. Dean Rutherford glanced at a printout. The performance last night received more live feedback and engagement than any student performance in 5 years. That's not the point, Langston began. Dr. Fenwick raised a hand. Actually, I think that's precisely the point. The chairman of the board, a quiet man in a gray suit, leaned forward. "Mr. Eli, would you mind telling the board your full name?" Eli's eyes didn't flinch. "Elijah Rowe." A ripple of stunned silence passed through the room like a dropped glass. Langston's mouth fell open. You're. "Yes," Eli said. "I am." No one dared speak for a long moment. Finally, Dean Rutherford whispered, "You founded the Rollingfield Foundation. You performed at the Royal Symphony in Vienna. Then, vanished." "I didn't vanish," Eli replied. "I walked away. From the applause. From the noise. Before it swallowed me whole." Langston tried to recover. He still broke rules. Eli turned toward him. "I came here to clean floors, not reputations. But when I saw a girl being taught to fear her own voice, I did what music asked of me. I listened. I responded. I didn't teach her to break rules. I reminded her what it sounds like when you stop obeying noise." The chairman sat back. "If we asked you to stay, not as janitor, but as mentor, would you consider it?" Eli's eyes didn't change. But his shoulders dropped just a fraction. "I'll think about it." As he turned to leave, Langston's voice cracked behind him. "You'll regret this." Eli didn't turn around. But the room was already echoing with the sound of a changing tune. Snow had started falling again, soft and slow like piano dust settling on sheet music. The morning after the board meeting, Elijah Rowe walked the marble halls of Albrecht Conservatory with no mop in hand. No cart. Just presence. And suddenly, that was more disruptive than anything he'd done before. Some students stopped mid-conversation when they saw him. Some smiled nervously, now aware that the man they'd once stepped around had been one of the greatest living pianists. Others avoided eye contact entirely, unsure of what to say, or how to reconcile their past dismissiveness. But Lena? She met him at the side entrance near the old mailroom, her braids pulled back, a new fire in her step. She held a folder under her arm and a half-smile on her face. "They assigned me a coach for the winter gala," she said. Elijah arched a brow. "Not me?" "No. Langston himself." She smirked. "Apparently, I need to be refined." Elijah gave a quiet, ironic chuckle. "And are you going to let him?" "I told him I'd try not to offend the key of C too much." They walked together through the West Corridor, past portraits of dead composers and dead traditions. Everywhere, Lena noticed how the air felt different now, less like permission, more like revolution. But tension still gripped the corners of the school. Langston hadn't given up. He may have lost the battle in the boardroom, but he still had power, and Lena knew he would use it. In the rehearsal hall, Lena sat at the Steinway. Langston stood behind her like a shadow in a well-cut suit, arms folded. "The gala isn't a place for drama," he said curtly. "It's for donors, dignitaries, and alumni. They want elegance. Not sentimentality." "I'm not planning on crying on the keys, Professor," Lena replied, her tone flat. Langston narrowed his eyes. "And this duet you submitted? It's been approved by the board." "I don't care what the board approved," he snapped. "I care about the legacy of this institution." She turned slightly in her seat. "Then maybe," she said, "it's time the legacy evolved." Langston flinched. Just barely. But she saw it. "Play," he commanded. She did. The first bars of Inheritance, now revised for duet, floated into the air. Her right hand carried the melody, reworked and softened. Her left hand grounded the lower harmonies. It was bolder now. Less apology, more declaration. When she finished, Langston said nothing. No corrections. No praise. He simply turned and left. Later that night, in the basement, Elijah sat at the old upright again, staring at the mural the students had painted above it. Hands reaching for floating notes, swirling into a golden spiral. A hint to what they were building. He didn't expect company. So when the chairman appeared in the doorway, Elijah raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "I used to sneak in here when I was a student," the chairman said, running his fingers along the edge of the dusty desk. "Play the cello, badly. Just to feel something vibrate in my chest. Reminded me I was still alive." Elijah gave a slight nod. "We forget what music really is. It's not performance," the chairman said. "It's confession. You remember that?" Elijah asked. "You said it in your Paris interview." "I never forgot." The chairman sat on an old stool, watching the shadows flicker on the walls. "Langston wants you gone. He's lobbying donors now." Elijah shrugged. "I expected that. But the board wants you to stay," the chairman said. "Not to teach theory. To guide the ones who don't fit." A beat of silence passed. The ones who've almost forgotten their own sound. Elijah looked down at his hands. "This place doesn't need another performer," the chairman added. "It needs a soul." Elijah's gaze drifted toward the piano. "Then we start here," he said quietly, "with the broken one." The day of the gala arrived with wind tearing through the city like strings being pulled too tight. Inside the conservatory, warmth and wealth collided, chandeliers lit, champagne flutes chilled, donors swirling in gowns and velvet. Everyone who had ever bought a wing, named a chair, or funded a symphony was present. Backstage, Lena adjusted her deep blue dress in the mirror. Her hands trembled slightly. Not from fear. From weight. Elijah entered holding something wrapped in soft velvet. "A gift," he said. She opened it. A worn brass metronome. "My wife's," Elijah said. She kept it long after she stopped playing. Said it reminded her that time could still be beautiful. Lena's voice caught. "Thank you." He nodded. "Play from that place," he said. "The one only you can find." When the MC called her name, the entire auditorium shifted. Some donors leaned forward in confusion. Why was she the final act? Others whispered with interest, gossip feeding curiosity. Lena stepped into the lights. Then Elijah followed. Gasps echoed. Langston rose halfway from his seat, furious, but didn't stop them. Couldn't. The board had signed off. And more importantly, the crowd was too hungry for drama to care about his outrage. The duet began. Soft. Unfolding. Elijah played the bass notes with reverence. A heartbeat in rhythm. Lena carried the melody, light, yearning, full of memory and ache. They crossed hands at the midpoint, her left overtaking his right. Then he pulled back, letting her lead. Then she faded, letting him return. They weren't playing for applause. They were playing for each other. For Camille. For the girl from the south side. For the man who once forgot how to feel. By the end, the audience wasn't clapping. They were crying. When the final note lifted, the silence was complete. Then, it began, a standing ovation. Not polite. Not practiced. But rising like a wave. Langston tried to stand and leave, but was blocked by the board. The chairman stepped onto the stage. He took the mic. "Tonight, you witnessed not only our most moving performance of the year," he said, "but the return of one of the greatest musicians this institution has ever known." He turned to Elijah. "Elijah Rowe has agreed to stay, not as janitor, but as the mentor of our future." Elijah stepped back, eyes glistening. Lena squeezed his hand. And for the first time in decades, he felt not like a man who left music, but one who had finally returned to it. The wind outside had softened, but the echoes of the gala still lingered inside the conservatory walls. Students whispered in the hallways. Professors, divided in opinion, held tense conversations over coffee. Some claimed it was a publicity stunt. Others admitted it was the first time they'd actually felt something in years. But the most powerful shift was quieter, subtle as breath. Lena found herself no longer avoided, but sought out. Not with envy, but with curiosity. They didn't ask for autographs. They asked, what did it feel like? And she always said the same thing, like telling the truth for the first time. Elijah stayed out of the spotlight. He didn't speak at press events. He didn't give interviews. He returned to the basement piano most mornings, just before sunrise, when the conservatory was still asleep and the only sound was his breath mixing with old wood. It was there that Lena found him one foggy morning, a thin leather notebook in her hand. "They want to name the new wing after you," she said. He kept playing. "I read about it in the donor newsletter. The Elijah Rowe Center for Musical Excellence." His fingers paused over a suspended cord. "That sounds like a mausoleum," he muttered. "They want a statue too." He dropped his hands completely. "Didn't I already die once?" She laughed. Then sat beside him. "I brought you something," she said, holding out the notebook. He opened it slowly. Inside were sketches, program concepts, course ideas, all handwritten in Lena's neat, narrow scrawl. "What's this?" "A proposal. Something I've been working on since the recital." He read the cover, The Listening Lab. Her voice dropped, serious now. "A space for collaboration. For experimentation. No auditions. No critiques. Just students learning from each other. And from you. Especially from you." Elijah flipped through the pages. There were outlines for emotional interpretation classes, improvisation sessions, even something called confessionals, where students could perform unfinished pieces and just talk about them. By the time he reached the final page, his voice had softened. "I'd like to co-direct this with you," he said. Lena blinked. "Me? You know what it's supposed to feel like," he said. "That's rarer than talent." They submitted the proposal to the board. 2 weeks later, it was approved. The basement was renovated, lightly. They kept the chipped tiles and the original piano. But now there were warm lights, fresh paint, and shelves lined with blank journals. A small plaque above the piano read, "The Listening Lab Built for the Unheard." A photograph of Camille, Elijah's late wife, was framed above the bench, her cello mid-bow, her smile suspended forever. The first student to walk through the doors of the Listening Lab wasn't a pianist. She wasn't even enrolled in the music program. She was a 17-year-old cleaning staff member who had overheard the recital and asked if she could just sit and listen. Elijah welcomed her in without question. Lena handed the girl a journal and said, "Write what you feel. Not what you think you should feel." She did. And when she finally sat at the piano weeks later, Elijah didn't correct a single note. "You don't need permission," he told her. "Just presence." News of the lab spread. Not in the press. But in whispers. In late-night messages between students. In quiet glances exchanged before secret jam sessions. Students who had once competed now collaborated. They began asking each other things like, "What were you trying to say here? What's this part supposed to feel like?" The conservatory began to hum differently. Less like a machine. More like a heart. But outside, the noise was returning. Clips of Lena and Elijah's duet had gone viral. A national news outlet dubbed it the Billionaire Janitor's Redemption. Offers poured in, reality shows, TED Talks, streaming deals, film rights. Elijah ignored all of them. But Lena? She wasn't sure. One day, she stood by the edge of the lake behind the conservatory, a thick envelope in her hand. Elijah joined her, quietly. "I got invited to the National Young Artists Showcase," she said. He said nothing. "It's televised. Big stage. Sponsors. Fame. Still, silence. What if I lose myself in it, she asked. What if it turns me into something I can't recognize? He looked at her, steady. Then we anchor you before you go. She met his eyes. Come with me. He smiled faintly. I'm not the one they want. But you're the reason I'm the one they see. She handed him the invitation. Play with me. Just once. On that stage. He looked down at the paper, his thumb tracing the edges. Please, she whispered. Not for the crowd. For me. He closed his eyes. Then nodded. That night, Lena practiced for hours, not for applause, but to honor what they had built. And Elijah stood at the door, listening, not as a teacher, not even as a mentor, but as someone who had once forgotten how to feel and now remembered what it sounded like. On the day of the showcase, they stood behind the curtain, side by side. Thousands waited beyond. And when the spotlight found them, Elijah Rowe, the man who had once disappeared, sat beside a girl who had once been overlooked. And together, they made the world listen. The velvet curtain lifted to reveal a sea of expectation. Television cameras swiveled into place. 1,000 eyes blinked, adjusted, and focused. Lena could feel the lights heating her skin, feel her heartbeat thudding like a second metronome in her chest. But beside her, Elijah sat still. Calm. Present. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked at her. You're not here to impress them, he whispered. She nodded. I know. You're here to remind them what music is for. Then he placed his hands on the keys, just as he had in the basement the first time, and she followed. They began with silence. Not empty silence. The kind that listens. And then, slowly, the melody of Inheritance returned, new again, reborn for a national audience. Lena led this time. Her hands confident, but not performative. Elijah followed with grace, building the harmony beneath her like the ground beneath a dancer's feet. Their duet was not flashy. There were no technical flourishes, no dramatic pauses meant to draw applause. Just emotion, laid bare, truth, offered without fear. Viewers at home leaned in. Producers in the control booth stopped speaking. A girl in the audience whispered, "I want to play piano," and her mother began to cry. When the final note came, a tremble of longing, suspended just above breath, they held it. Longer than necessary. Then Lena lifted her hands slowly, as if letting go of something she'd carried for too long. The auditorium didn't erupt immediately. It breathed. And then it rose. A tidal wave of applause. Real. Wrecking. Raw. Some people clapped until their hands hurt. Others just covered their mouths and wept. Elijah sat back, his chest rising and falling, not with pride, but with peace. Backstage, producers rushed toward them. You have no idea what you just did. We want you on tour. We can get you on 60 Minutes, the Today Show, even. But Lena wasn't listening. She grabbed Elijah's hand and pulled him through the side exit into the cool Chicago night, their breaths misting in the glow of the street lamp. They stood on the sidewalk in silence, the roar of the world muffled behind them. That felt different, she whispered. He nodded. It was. Do you think I'm ready now? For all of this? His eyes were full of something both soft and solemn. You're ready, he said. But promise me one thing. Anything. When it gets loud, and it will, when they start calling you genius, prodigy, miracle, come back to the sound of your own hands. She nodded, the words sinking deep. And you? She asked. What now? He looked up at the stars above the city, like they might carry an answer. I think I'm ready to finish the piece I started long ago. Her eyes lit up. Nocturne in Amber. He shook his head gently. The one after that. The one I never had the courage to write. She smiled slowly. What will you call it? He looked at her. The room she left behind. She touched his coat sleeve. Then let me help you write it. The next morning, they returned to the conservatory. The snow had melted in patches. Students lingered in the courtyard, humming motifs from the showcase Duet. The mural above the basement piano had grown, new colors, new hands, golden threads weaving between painted fingers. Inside the listening lab, Elijah sat with a pencil and blank manuscript paper. He wrote a single note. Then paused. Then another. Lena sat beside him, watching, occasionally suggesting a phrase or a rest. It wasn't fast. It wasn't easy. But it was alive. Word spread, Elijah Rowe was composing again. But the greater surprise wasn't his return. It was that he was writing the piece with Lena. Critics speculated. Old school traditionalists scoffed. But the students? They just listened. One rainy afternoon, while they played through a new section of the composition, footsteps approached. They turned. Langston stood in the doorway. Not angry. Not bitter. Just tired. I listened to the broadcast, he said. Neither of them replied. He stepped closer, looking at the piano, the mural, the dim golden light of the lab. I was wrong. Lena looked at him, cautious. I taught music like it was a wall, Langston said. But you turned it into a window. Elijah nodded, not in judgment, not in forgiveness. Just acknowledgement. Langston pulled a folded sheet of paper from his coat. A piece I started once. Never finished. It's not much. But maybe it belongs here now. He turned to go. But Lena called after him. Professor Langston. He paused. She stood, held out a chair beside the piano. Would you like to play with us? He hesitated. For a long moment. Then he came back. They didn't rehearse. They just played. 3 voices, 3 scars, 3 lifelines braided into melody. And that night, as the final note faded into silence, no one needed to say it aloud. The conservatory had changed. Forever. In the days that followed, something quiet but irreversible swept through the conservatory. The change didn't come from any official announcement. There were no press releases, no banners hung. But the shift was everywhere, etched into the way students walked, the way professors listened, the way the building itself seemed to breathe again. The conservatory had not been redesigned. It had been rediscovered. The listening lab became its beating heart. Each week, students from all programs, string, jazz, composition, even literature, gathered in the basement not to perform, but to be heard. Some brought finished pieces. Others brought pain. All brought honesty. No hierarchy. No corrections. Only one requirement: make someone feel. Elijah became more than a mentor. He became a compass. Wandering the halls not with a mop, but with a notebook tucked under his arm and a question always on his lips: where are you hiding in this piece? He still wore his old janitor's coat on rainy days, not out of humility, but remembrance. It reminded him what almost broke him. And what brought him back. One afternoon, as he organized journals in the archive, Lena came bounding in with a dusty box. Found this in the back of the storage room, she said. It's labeled Rowe. Unreleased. Inside were cassette tapes, dozens, some cracked, others still sealed. Raw sessions. Scattered recordings. Forgotten ideas. But one stood out. Labeled in delicate handwriting, for the day you return to yourself. Camille's handwriting. Elijah stared at it for a long moment before placing it gently in the player. The tape whirred. Then, the fragile, aching sound of a solo cello. Camille's voice followed, soft and laughing. Elijah. You don't know it yet, but you're going to leave the world to find your way back to it. And when you do, I hope this melody meets you there." Lena didn't speak. She just reached over and rested her hand on his. He didn't cry. He didn't need to. Because for the first time in years, he wasn't lost anymore. The next morning, Elijah stood in the grand atrium as sunlight poured through the stained glass ceiling. Students rushed past. Some waved. Some bowed their heads. One boy, maybe 8, walked up, holding a wrinkled piece of sheet music. "Are you the man who fixed the broken piano?" he asked. "I suppose I am," Elijah replied. "My teacher said it was too old to matter. But it made me feel something. So I wrote this." Elijah unfolded the paper. Crude notation. No bars. No time signature. Just feeling. "Will you play it for me?" he asked. The boy nodded. They walked down together to the listening lab. And as the boy climbed up onto the worn bench, his feet not yet touching the floor, he began to play. It was messy. It stumbled. But it felt like breath. That night, after everyone had left, Lena returned to the basement. On the piano bench sat a folded note, written in Elijah's familiar script. "Lena. If you're reading this, I've gone somewhere quieter. But not far. Music never leaves us. It only changes key. Thank you, for seeing me when I forgot who I was. For teaching me that the silence I ran to was never the enemy. You gave me my last song. Now go write yours. Let it be fierce. Let it be flawed. Let it be true. I'll be listening." She folded the note and tucked it into her journal. Then, with no spotlight, no stage, no applause, she placed her hands on the piano keys and began to play. It wasn't inheritance. It wasn't Nocturne in Amber. It was something new. A song of beginnings. A song for the janitor who became a legend again. A song for every unheard voice waiting in the dark. Outside, snow began to fall once more, quiet and patient. And inside, in the smallest, most honest room in the building, a girl played into the darkness. And the darkness listened. Sometimes the world tries to tell you that greatness must announce itself, with credentials, with applause, with fame. But the truest music? It's what we play when no one's watching. Elijah Rowe walked away from the spotlight not because he failed, but because he forgot how to feel. Lena helped him remember. And together, they rewrote what it means to teach, to create, and to matter. So if you've ever been silenced, overlooked, told you don't belong, remember this. You are not background noise. You are the melody someone is still waiting to hear. If this story moved you, subscribe to True Echo for more real, powerful stories like this. Comment below where you're watching from, we want to hear your story too. And don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to be reminded. Their voice matters.